Hello and welcome back. The premise at FM23 Roleplay is that we take a 15-year-old American kid, give him a 200 potential rating, and we follow him throughout his career. We will not coach any club, and we will not interfere by using the editor. Will he become the greatest American player? Well, we'll have to watch. Now, when we last left Henry Marshall, he got his chance to talk to his new manager at DC United, John Harkes. There are only 8 games left in the 2022 season, so our hope is going to be to play all of these games here and move through the off season a bit. Now, Henry's 16th birthday will be in November. It's August right now, but we're not there in November yet. We're still here in August, and we want to touch on one of our regular goals, which is to introduce you to some of the other regulars on the DC United squad. Today's player I'm going to talk about is Russell Canoes. And the reason I highlighted him is that Real Salt Lake is just offered $2.6 million plus one player for a trade to get him over to Utah. Now, Canoes is 27 years old, and he's listed as a ball-winning midfielder who serves primarily as a defender. He is second on the team in minutes per game. He has a rating of 6.88. And an interesting fact about him from Wikipedia is that he's a licensed realtor. So if you're looking for a home in the DC area, you know who to call. He's currently a financial go-getter, running an Amazon business and looking after his stock portfolio. He's from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and he married his high school sweetheart. He serves as the DC United player rep for the Major League Soccer Players Association, which is the players' union of MLS. So let's move forward and try to play out the last few games of this awful season. And we'll move forward, cut away from the boring stuff, give you some idea, the highlights, and the recap. Some news right away here is that the trade with DC has been rejected. And that trade would have seen Real Salt Lake. It was finally negotiated down to 215K, their general allocation money, plus the first Michael Chang, this guy. 6.9, not too bad. That he would. They also got the first round of the super draft and Chicago's first round pick in the two. So there have been 2 first round picks in the super draft, and DC United said no. All right, so let's review what's been going on since we spoke just a few seconds ago here. So basically, over these last 7 games, we are going to have 3 wins, 3 losses, and a draw. Let's look at what happened here and go down the schedule. So first, to start off, we had a big 2-0 win against Atlanta United. Got the ball rolling. Nigel Robertha, he had 2 goals in that game. And that got him placed on the team of the week. This is followed by a 2-0 win in Colorado. In this case, goalkeeper Tyler Miller, he was the guy who had game of the week in that one. But then we had a couple of losses against Real Salt Lake here. Then a 1-2 loss against Sporting KC. A loss which was very disappointing because they gave up 2 goals in the latter third of the game. Some other things going on in the rest of the league. Oscar Pereira, he was fired at FC Dallas after just 55 days as Nashville pulled itself out of the West Cellar and Dallas fell into the cellar. So Pablo Riche took over that job. Herman Lasada was fired by struggling CF Montreal before this game down here. Paulo Bento is his end-of-season replacement. Atlanta ended up clinching the Supporter Shield over Philly, and that made the DC win against Atlanta here make it look a lot better. Russell Canoes finally got traded to Houston. To Houston. We talked about him before. Houston picked him up, but it took a lot to get him from DC United. Houston had to cough up $500,000. They had to give up two first-round picks in the Super Draft from Houston, one in 2023 and one in 2024. So Harks is clearly planning here long term. Incidentally, Canoes had been briefly appointed as DC United's vice captain, but that didn't last long. He has now been replaced that same day by Victor Paulson. Furthermore, DC United listed their $4.1 million a year striker Christian Benteke as surplus to requirements. He's a 31-year-old ex-Crystal Palace player. Since the Nets' highest salary after his $4.1 million is Taxi Fountas' $1.6 million, it can really free up some money for DC United if another club picks up Benteke. But now some big jumps in Henry's career here. First, this game against Inter Miami right down here, where DC United won 2-0, but he finally had that good game he was looking for. A 7.9 rating. He got player of the match. He was happy. His new gaffer was happy. His parents were happy. Even his teammate over here, Marshall Pines, who scored an assist, was happy because the MLS named Pines as a member of the Team of the Week. They didn't name Marshall as Team of the Week. It was a big moment for Henry, a bigger moment I'll talk about even in a little bit. The last two games of the season we're looking at, against CF Montreal, they were on the road. It was Henry's first game ever played in a foreign country. And they lost that one 1-2. Chris Durkin got a knee injury. What made this an embarrassing loss is that Montreal was down to 10 men in this game. Joel Waterman had a red card in the 40th minute. Tyler Miller had a horrible game for DC United. And finally, the last game of the year, their last chance to possibly mathematically tie Columbus, which I believe is in 13th place, didn't happen. They were at home. Cincinnati drew 1-1. Henry Marshall's ratings were respectively 6.8 and 6.5 for these two games. So he only really had the one great game. That was at Inter Miami. But the big news on Henry Marshall's part is that Marshall has his first cap. He was named to the under 20 USA team. They ended up playing a game against Argentina. This was in Carson City, but they lost that game 1-2. They did lose it 1-2. Argentina is a highly ranked under 20 squad, but Marshall had a 7.3 rating in that game. Yeah, very good performance. But of course, Argentina, much better. Roman Vega got the player of the match in that game. And, he showed out well. We don't know if he's going to be playing in the CONCACAF under 21st round. There's a series of games that takes place for the under 20 starting in October. So we don't know if it's going to cause a slight delay in his getting back home. He may have to possibly be spending a month with the U.S. National team. I'm sure his parents are quite disappointed. Meanwhile, Henry is over the moon about the whole thing. So we talk about this. Where is the championship taking place? It's in the USA. He doesn't have to leave a foreign country. We'll go through these games, and if he gets picked, if he doesn't get picked, we'll just skip them. But we'll see what happens next.
Okay, we are going to split our work up into some pieces here. We are now in the off season, and Henry Marshall was hoping that he could play some more under 20 games, but he wasn't called in either of the two friendly games. He wasn't called in the CONCACAF under 20s champion, so he got the chance to go back home to Shreveport. That was a disappointment to him. It was a source of joy to his parents and his older sister Maggie, who finally got a chance to see him again. Basically, while he was back in Shreveport, DC had finished its season 8 wins, 5 ties, 21 losses. It was a 14th place finish for DC United. It was their worst ever finish in the Supporters' Shield in their history. But even then, John Harkes didn't release anybody. He re-signed several players to contracts. Elsewhere in the MLS, Bob Bradley was fired as coach of Toronto. The coaching hires were Juan Osorio, who replaced him in Toronto, and Mike Anhauser in Cincinnati. Seattle won the CONCACAF Champions League. It was the first time an American team had ever won the CONCACAF Champions League. In Major League Soccer finals, we had Philadelphia, which was second in the Eastern Conference, against the LA Football Club, who had finished 7th. They were the very last playoff position, and they made it all the way to the finals. Despite finishing virtually with a 500 record and, a -3 goal difference in the regular season. So LA Football Club was living the dream until they lost the finals 2-0 to Philadelphia. The dream was over. It was Philadelphia's very first MLS season championship. The DC Fan Awards, Marshall didn't win anything. Nigel Roberta, he was the fans' most favorite player, and also he was also named the Young Player of the Year. Brandon Hines Ike, I think that's how it's pronounced, and Steven Birnbaum, the captain, they were the second and third most favorite players by the fans, respectively. Columbus, which finished 13th in the East, they set an MLS record for the fewest goals ever in a season. They only scored 24 total goals, and even with that, they still finished one position ahead of DC United, which gives you an idea of how bad DC United's position was. Now, for the major awards in the MLS, you had Facundo Torres of Orlando City. He was the Young Player of the Year. Daniel Storrs of Houston he won the Humanitarian Award. Kai Wagner from Philadelphia Union, which won the MLS championship, he was named Defender of the Year. Keaton Parks of the New York City Football Club, he was the Player of the Year, and he was the most valuable player. Jaap Stam, who is the head manager of the Philadelphia Union, he was the Coach of the Year. Nuno Santos from Charlotte, he was the Newcomer of the Year. Luquinhas from the New York Red Bulls, he won the Individual Fair Play Award. And Andre Blake from the Philadelphia Union, he was the Goalkeeper of the Year. Now, the big thing that everybody was waiting for in the United States was the World Cup. And the World Cup, took place, during November, to December, given where it was held. The USA in their group, they beat Iran 2-0, they beat Wales 2-1, and they had a 0-0 draw with England getting out of their group. In the second round of the World Cup, they faced Senegal, and that game ended in a 0-0 tie with the U.S. winning on penalty kicks 5-4. Senegal was down to 10 men due to a red card after 25 minutes. In the quarterfinals, however, the USA ran into France. They lost 1-2 to France. And France moved all the way through, finally beating the Netherlands 3-0 in the finals of the World Cup. That gave France their second World Cup in a row because they'd also won it in 2018. So France won it in 2018 and 2022. The last team to win 2 consecutive World Cups was Brazil. They had won 2 straight in 1958 and 1962. And then there was Henry Marshall back at home in Shreveport, Louisiana. He had to admit that even though he didn't get a chance to play for the U.S. team during the break, he could fall right back into his old home routine. It was like having a summer vacation, but during the fall. He was also glad to see his old friends at Loyola College Prep, who are now sophomores. Sadly, he had lost some of his acquaintances. Those were the seniors in the varsity team that had graduated. Furthermore, his friends now had different common experiences, new teachers, new things happening at school, and sometimes he felt a little bit shut out. However, his friends still liked him and vice versa. Some of his friends can now drive, and when they weren't all at school, he would spend a lot of time with them. Some of them were now licensed drivers, and they would drive to parties or go to chain restaurants and try to get on the edge of trouble, but not actually in trouble. They understood that Henry wasn't a millionaire, not yet, and he resisted sending them any money. They grumbled about it, but none of them took it harshly. He went to a lot of movies, saw a rock concert with his acquaintances, and tried to have a good time. Now his older sister Maggie was interested in a computer science major at Duke, like their older brother, Petey. She was applying to Duke and a few safety schools, but she was also very interested in Henry's online learning. He told her that even though he was passing, he was kind of half-assing it. According to Virginia homeschooling law, he could leave school at either 18 or whenever he passed a school leaving exam. He thought it was kind of stupid to stay in a holding tank for 4 years, even if you had learned everything you were supposed to have known in a shorter time than that. She was kind of shocked that he wasn't really trying very hard. She said, "Are you even interested in going to college at all?" And he said, "If I can make it in the MLS, no, not really. School's pretty boring, either in person or online. It's just memorizing a bunch of crap and spitting it out back again. And the other parts are either kissing someone's rear end or making sure that you wear your uniform correctly. I don't miss Loyola, not one bit." He was still calling someone's ass a rear end. Henry avoided cursing, even at age 16. One of his favorite activities, and one he'd always remember in the years to come, was driving with Maggie. Theoretically, he wasn't allowed to drive yet in Virginia because he had to hold his learner's permit a certain amount of time in that state. However, he figured it would be good enough to drive with in Louisiana as long as he had Maggie with him, and they drove everywhere. He and Maggie called themselves Bonnie and Clyde, with Maggie saying, "Step on it, Clyde," as he would pull out of a Walmart parking lot. He was glad to be back in the world of the familiar again. In late November, he celebrated his 16th birthday, and that same day he watched the U.S. beat Iran in the World Cup. Thanksgiving was with the entire family, except for Petey, but Petey would be back for Christmas because he always was. By late December, he was looking forward to buying presents for the family, and he'd been allowed to spend $100 on each family member. But when he was out shopping with Maggie on December 13th, he got a call from Hunter Alvarez, his agent. "Hey, Hunter," Henry said. "Henry, I don't know if you know this, but the St. Louis expansion team for 2023 has their expansion draft today. I hate to tell you this, but they have 5 picks, and you are pick number 5. You won't be on DC United anymore. St. Louis is going to take your contract." "What? How come nobody told me that?" "Well, you're being told right now. You'll be chatting with Lutz Pfannenstiel, the new general manager, later today after you finish talking with me, and they finish drafting. They're going to make the picks today. I've already been contacted, however, by LA Galaxy and by Toronto, and they're sniffing around if you were going to be picked. I think the word is out, or that St. Louis is trying to shop you around on loan. They think you're an asset. You just might not be an asset for them." "What? So that's it? I'm in St. Louis now?" "Yeah, when he says your name, yeah, you are. But you may not play a minute for them. I'll be working the phone. DC United will contact you to tell you what your next steps are." "Well, what about the Hannons?" "Who?" My host family." Well," Alvarez said, "well, I hope you packed your shit because you won't be seeing them for a long time to come. You've got a few weeks before training camp opens. Sorry, but this is a part of the business. DC United didn't protect you in the draft. They probably figured St. Louis would never pick you, but they bet wrong. I'll try to get you out of St. Louis." And with that, he hung up. Henry barely remembered the rest of that day. He was contacted by Lutz Pfannenstiel and by then the new manager Bradley Carnell,
who they made the right noises in welcoming him to the team. After that, he was contacted by Dave Casper, who was the general manager of DC United, who was confirming that he'd been contacted by everyone and thanking him for his time on DC United. John Harkes didn't even call. An assistant from the St. Louis City front office called to get contact information and assure them that DC United would send everything they had to get him up and running in their system. And at St. Louis, they would talk to him later about the team schedules and training and boarding and everything. Now, it wasn't like Henry had never been to St. Louis. He'd been there in that youth game against Argentina this year where he earned his under-20 camp. That game was played at Centene Stadium. That's where the new MLS club was going to play. But his major concern, however, was having to get another learner's permit in Missouri when he already had one in Virginia. The family was stunned when they heard the news. They came to a consensus opinion. The best place for Henry was in Los Angeles because he had his two brothers there and because it was a playoff team. The second best place for Henry was St. Louis. The team would probably stink in St. Louis, but you could drive from Shreveport to St. Louis in about 8 hours. And his parents had actually got opportunity to visit him, at least on weekends, or long holidays. The worst place for him to go would be Toronto, very far away from Shreveport. It'd be in a foreign country, and it'd be miserably cold in the winter. And to tie the bow on this ribbon of crap, he checks the DC United special group chat apps. There was a group chat for the entire organization, and there was a second chat app just for the players. And reflexively, he went to check it, and he'd been dropped from both of the chats. He was now a young man, without a team. And that's more than enough for this episode. I mean, I didn't see this coming, not at all. I mean, St. Louis City isn't the best place for Henry to land, but who knows? There's still a little bit of the offseason left to go. Someone might sign him. Anyway, if you like what you hear or you see, make a comment or hit the like and or subscribe button. Until next time, bye-bye.